So we can see your hand.
I see the Z, but I don't see
You're in
it
the corner.
in A to Z. It's Arnold. Oh, there it is. Oh, he's of council now. Okay. Okay,
6 o'clock. All this regular board directed meeting for April 22nd. Do you have any 2449?
Do not.
Mr. Curtis is not with us again this evening. Call the roll, Allison, please.
Director Martinson,
Here.
Director Kentosh,
Here.
Director Berg,
Here.
Director Quillisi,
Here.
Director Ulrich,
Here.
and Chair Stone.
Here.
And as stated, Director Curtis is absent this evening.
Let's move on to item 3. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, Jeff or Allison, do we have any additions or amendments to the agenda?
We do not.
Do we have any public concerns, either in person or public? All right. And I guess we'll move to items 6 and 7, and we have to do this as well for the consent item.
I don't believe so.
We'll make it up, do it twice next time. If we have to. So we look for a motion and a second for item 6 and 7.
I'll move approval of 6 and 7.
I'll second.
Is that the consent calendar?
Yes.
I do have a comment on the minutes, and I'm not going to ask to have it withdrawn, just a comment. Notice that section 24, board member and general manager comments will be on page 13 of the PDF. It says general manager comments, and it says none. I know Jeff better than to know that he didn't say anything.
I don't think I did.
I think he said he didn't have anything that one time.
Really? Hey, withdraw my, what I was gonna suggest was in the future, if, I know we're not under any obligation to cite his comments in the minutes because it's not an action item. In the future, if he says something, you can say something like, he gave us an update on several items, but if he didn't say anything, I withdraw my comment.
Yeah, no, I usually highlight all of the things that he says in brief, so, but this time he didn't say anything.
Apologize. Wasn't paying attention.
Haven't missed a meeting in 13 years, and I think that was the first meeting I had no comments.
Okay.
Condition.
Anything from any other directors? All right, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, Allison, please.
Martinson,
Hey, yes.
Director Kentosh,
Yes.
Director Berg,
Yes.
Director Quillisi,
Yes.
Director Ulrich,
Yes.
and Chair Stone.
Yes. All right. Move on to item 8. Preliminary budget.
With this?
Yeah.
So separate from your packet as a separate attachment was the preliminary budget for fiscal year 24-25. If you reviewed it or the staff report, you'll see that we're recommending a 5% rate increase. It is a 5% rate increase, but it is also a reduction in the contributions to the reserves. There was a little bit of an additional shortage. So in lieu of a greater rate increase, we are recommending less go to the reserves this year, only because we are anticipating some reimbursement from FEMA this fiscal year. That then we can decide as a board, a separate board action, what reserves to put those back into. So hopefully we won't be shorting the reserves after all, when we reserve some FEMA money back this year. Fingers crossed. We're getting closer. Other than that, all of the budget categories for the departments went up a regular, increment that they do every year. So nothing sort of to highlight other than some of the categories went up more than expected. Legal expenses, as we battle sort of ADU legislation, as we engage LCW, some of those things are driving up legal costs, and just, consulting on some more personnel related items. We think that will continue. hopefully level off a little bit. But it is definitely something that we saw increase this year that we wanted to consider as a regular increase for next year. Other than that, as we mentioned a couple of times this year, the cost of chemicals has gone up, the cost of labor overall has gone up. So we've seen that impact some of our categories.
Got 3 colas in a row.
Yes.
But
Yes. We've seen some of our sort of salaries and benefits have sort of leveled off a little bit as we've had some retirees. We plan on bringing in new staff. New staff tend to be a little bit less expensive. They usually come in at a lower level. Some of them are a lower level in CalPERS. So we've accounted for sort of that, and that's helped some of the salaries and benefits this year also. Wednesday is a full budget study session. So if you take the time, review the budget, if you have any specific questions regarding any of the pages in there, you can email them in advance to me and I can prepare a response, or you can ask them, at the time, and I can try to respond to you specifically. Other than that, that's pretty much, it's actually a really, really good budget.
The only thing I would add is we haven't had a rate increase in 3 years, and the CPI has gone up almost 20% in those 3 years. And this year, right now, today, the CPI is hovering between 3.4 and 4%. So, although a 5% rate increase is more than normal, it's definitely been moderated by some of the work we've done the last 3 years to kind of be very efficient in what we do.
Director Kintosh.
I got a little confused there because I read in the staff report that we had a 5% increase proposed in the rates. But you mentioned taking it from reserves, are we?
No, so it's 5% rate increase recommended. There's also a reduction in the contribution to reserves being made because the shortage is actually more than 5%. So it's a combination of the two to balance the budget.
Okay.
Yes. And just highlighting on page 37, we did a little table this year to sort of show some of our comparable or partner agencies in the area and what their proposed rate increases are, and they're quite high. So 5% is very reasonable compared to some of the ones that we're seeing.
Director Byrd.
I actually am looking forward to a detailed review of the proposed budget. I would like to make a motion for approval of 8A and
Have questions before we vote on that. The simplest one is say, assuming we're supposed to motion and therefore we vote on accepting the preliminary budget. If we accept the preliminary budget, does that mean there's an automatic 5% rate increase? Or do we have to approve that separately later?
So the
Specific.
process for a municipal budget this is just accepting it for review tonight. Wednesday night, we're going to have a study session, and then next Monday, you actually approve the budget and recommend we go to a Proposition 218 vote by the public. Now, in public agencies, water and sewer agencies, a vote is not by the ratepayers they don't have to vote for the rate increase. It's actually a protest vote. So legally, as long as we get less than 50% of our ratepayers voting no, the rate goes into effect. The reality is in years past, when we've done a rate increase, we will get literally a handful, this many people protest the vote, which is nowhere near the threshold. There have been a couple of cases in Ventura County with other agencies where they had a protest vote, didn't get to the 50% threshold, but got a substantial chunk of protest votes. And the council, it was happened in the city of Oxnard 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more, decided to reevaluate it purely based on the number, even though the protest vote didn't cross the 50% threshold. So that's always an option for the board, is to evaluate how many protests votes you get, what you would like to consider as a threshold in discussion for evaluating those protests. But it doesn't go into effect until the 218 hearing is in June.
And 17th is the final.
So June 17th will be the public hearing for the rate increase, where the protests votes are required to be submitted in writing. Prior to that, Allison will give the board a summary of any protest votes received. There's a formal process for that hearing. Given past history, my guess is there'll be a handful of protest votes, literally it's many-ish. Go forward. But again, it's a protest vote. It's not a yes has to be more than 50%. The no has to be more than 50% to legally stop it.
7,000 people to show up or something.
Well, you actually need more than that because not more than 7,000. We have about 7,400 customers,
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
but we send out about 12,000 letters because we send them out to every situs address and we send them out to every property owner address that's different than the situs address, because from a public hearing perspective, although you may have a tenant and a landowner that live at separate addresses, there have been some court cases that have sort of made the inference that either one has a right to vote. And so you would expect we'd send out 7,400. We send out about 12,000. They go worldwide. Some of those addresses are Europe, Asia, Australia, all over the world, because that's where the registered property owner lives. So send out 12,000 and you get 5 protests back. Kind of order of magnitude is what we've historically seen.
So, more questions. When you came up with the 5%, do you have a dollar amount that results in an additional revenue from?
It's about we have a $10 million budget. So 1% is about $100,000 in revenue.
So it's about 500,000. So comment I have is kind of what happened last year. When we raised the budget last time, it was based on a projection. We thought we were going to need some more money. So we went for the rate increase. We got the rate increase. That time I estimated it'd be about 400,000 in increased revenues from that. At the end of the year, we turned 400,000 back into our various accounts because we'd not spent that much. So since then, I've kind of taken the position that given we don't have a very variable income stream because it's a tax, given our reserve, I won't support any budget rate increase unless there's a proven need rather than a projected need.
Well, we haven't done a rate increase in 3 years.
I understand, and that's what I'm talking about.
I think it's important to remember.
Every year since then, we've turned 400,000 back into the budget. In my mind, we took about $1 million out of the public that we didn't need to do.
Well, remember that $400,000 that we returned back in, a lot of that was fees and overages from a couple of individual accounts. So Pepsi, through Dairy Farmers of America, has a bill. Their overage, on top of the standard, was about $300,000. So we never budgeted that $300,000 because we didn't feel it was a reasonable revenue. Dairy Farmers of America is now closed. That $300,000 is not going to go back into the or was accounted for.
Right.
So that 400.
There's any number of budget line items that you can point to like that. My whole point is because of the amount of reserve we have, unless we have a proven need, I'm not willing to support a rate increase. And that's just it.
It's fine.
For instance, in this budget, we don't include the 5 million we might get back from FEMA. So I think it's 4.5 is what you're projecting.
Director Quillisi.
I wanted to ask, how does a protest vote go up? Is it you get a letter from?
It has to be in writing. We send out a letter with a piece of paper that they can, tells them how to send in a letter, a phone call. It's not a voicemail. It's not an email. In order for a protest,
Signed protest.
a signed protest vote.
Director Byrd.
Waiting for my motion to get seconded to kill it.
Director Pinkham.
I'll second the motion unless Steve wants to do that. But I still have a question, maybe you can answer on Wednesday night if you're not ready now. But I have a question about the reserves. We paid $5 million to contractors and consultants because of the emergency repairs that we made, $5 million, of which one we're liable for. And that means that we're gonna be expecting to get $4 million back from FEMA, which I assume is gonna be the case. And in your, on page 63 of the board packet today, there's a list of our restricted reserves. It comes out to $18 million, and at the bottom it says, does not.
So that actually doesn't pertain specifically to that section. It pertains to the overall financial report. So the overall financial report in any section in this entire report does not reflect any FEMA expenditures.
But when I say not reflect, does that mean that when we get the $4 million, it's gonna add to it, the reserves? Or have you already assumed you're getting the $4 million?
There, that is not reflected in here at all. So what we did is those are budgeted to a very specific, like CIP sort of line item. And then they will be washed out and we will have to then allocate what we get back to the specific reserve funds where we want to put it. Otherwise, all of these would be negative because we've spent more than is actually in there. We'd be fictitiously moving money around for expenditures. So we've been spending that out of available cash. And when we receive it back, then we can decide what to do with it. And there'll be specific recommendations based on how we spent that and where it came from.
So Jim,
Reserves 18 million, or if we get the money back, will our reserves go up to 22 million?
Yes, correct. You'll be adding to the reserves if you so choose to do that.
it'll
but
go
the
up to
reserve-
22.
Yes, but the reserves itself is not actually 22 million. It's
So,
significantly less than that because only some of them are available to be spent. But yes,
so the 18 million, if you look at the line items, the top item of the 3.6 million, although we have to book that as an account, that's not district money, that's employee money. So that's deferred compensation that employees have deferred through a IRS 457 plan. So that 3.6 million, almost 3.7 million at the top isn't our money. You then go down to the 2003 and 2016 debt issue payment reserves. Those are reserve amounts that are set aside for the bond payment. So of the 18 million, there's really about 12 million in actual reserves because you can't count those as actual cash that the district can spend. So
But there's the $3.6 million in reserve for deferred compensation, but we can't touch that.
with employee money, but it hasn't been paid yet to employees because they've deferred the compensation.
Right, so it's,
Fenced.
It's fenced. It's inside our audit walls. But as soon as the employees retire and say, give me my money, then that goes away automatically.
so when we get paid back our $4 million from FEMA, we can decide to put some of it into these reserves, which will do our reserves.
Yes.
You put it into other funds and you guys are delegated for certain FEMA plan repairs.
Yes.
Okay, you've answered my question. Thank you. I'm ready.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further?
wait, I didn't get a second. Who was the second? Okay.
Hearing no further questions, I guess we can call the roll, Allison.
Director Curtis? Jack, did you hear enough of this to vote on it or no?
The motion was to accept the preliminary budget. Oh, yes. Subject to a work session on Wednesday.
Director Martinson,
We'll accept the preliminary budget, yes.
Director Kentosh,
Yes.
Director Berg,
Yes.
Director Quillisi,
Yes.
Director Ulrich,
Yes.
and Chair Stone.
Yes. I don't know if it makes any difference for the minutes or not, or if your copy's this way, but on that one, it should be item 9, or item 8, A and B instead of item 9. We have item 9, A and B.
Your numbering might be off, but I'll check mine.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, yours is on.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to item 9, consolidation of district election resolution number 02405.
The other item 9.
The other.
Seeing if you're on your toes. So this is just a formality that we do prior to any election year, which is a request to the county to have our election consolidated with the general election in November. They do require a resolution request, and so this is before you to approve so that we essentially reduce our overall costs of an election by consolidating with the county's general election. And we have several directors up for reelection, so, or
Oh, odd numbers.
Guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'll move approval of items 9A and B.
I'll second.
Motion in a second. Any discussion? Nelson, call the roll, please.
Director Curtis,
Yes.
Director Martinson,
Yay.
Director Kentosh,
Yes.
Director Berg,
Yes.
Director Quillisi,
Yes.
Director Ulrich,
Yes.
and Chair Stone.
Yes. So let's move on to item 10, budget adjustment number 2024-18, budget adjustment to fund completed emergency projects. Yeah.
So
Take this one.
one of the things we've worked on as we've gone through our emergency work from FEMA and late, is we've worked to spend free cash flow to fund those endeavors. However, the emergency work of this last February draw down our available cash to the point where, in order from an audit standpoint, we need to do a paper transfer from our collection system reserve to the general fund to actually count for those projects of the last year. So we're still tracking $5 million plus or minus of FEMA work, and we expect to get most of that back, not all of it, given our local share.
This is not that.
No, but this is we've spent down that 5 million was available cash. So when we went into this year's two projects on Foster Park and Burnham Road, we pulled down those paper dollars even more. There's money to be spent. This is a paper transfer to make sure the accounts line up. This is not needing cash to pay bills. There's no risk of not paying bills. It's really just to move money from one reserve account to the other to make sure the audit lines up correctly, the accountant. This is a Shailene issue, not a pay the contractor issue.
We spent it before we transferred it.
Jeff, do we anticipate getting that 4.5 million back from FEMA within the next budget year?
Yes. We're making slow and steady progress. We're about ready to write a letter to FEMA, sort of outlining the issues. And then we're going to take that letter and we're going to send it to Steve Bennett, our assemblyman. We're going to send it to Salud Carbajal and Julia Brownlee. Say, hey, can you politicians help apply a bit of education to the seat of learning to try and accelerate things a little bit.
It helps.
Well,
We try and be respectful of the process and not light the fire too early in the process when the paperwork hasn't all gotten in the system. But everything's in the system now, and it's outside of our world, and we need help in that world moving it forward.
He close to 2 years get a tax refund for my late brother who died in February 22. Took 2 weeks after I sent in a letter to Carvajal's office.
That letter should probably go to FEMA here in the next couple of days or so, and then we'll CC the letter to our politicians to help the ball over the line.
Anybody have any questions on this?
I have a question. On that, Jeff, when we took that money out of our savings, did we have to sell bonds? At the stock market?
What we did is two things. One, we used free cash flow. So when we got our tax payment that went to the county, rather than sending it and buying more bonds, we used it to pay for the FEMA work. And then when we were doing the FEMA work and a bond sold, rather than rebuy the bond, we used the proceeds of that bond to help pay for these projects as well. So we used sort of free cash flow to handle this. This is really just to make the accounting work in terms of where the money came from and which bucket the money is coming out of.
Well, the reason I asked that, we've only got 10 billion with our bond people. I think we started with more than 10 million, didn't we?
Well, we always knew, and this is sort of a conservative approach, the district has saved a lot of money over the years to pay for our TMDL project. So our reserve account got kind of high because we knew we were going to spend $8 to $10 million on a new project down at the treatment plant. And it's been the district's policy to sort of fund projects out of cash flow rather than incurring bond costs and then paying interest for 30 years. And so the reserve accounts got high to pay for TMDL nutrient project. And at the same time, those reserves also help carry us through a significant FEMA event. Remember, FEMA doesn't pre-fund disaster work. You can't go get an advance from FEMA. You have to be ready to be self-sufficient, front it all. So the conservative approach of the district to front the costs to the TMDL and also have sufficient funds to front the FEMA work, I think is a very prudent approach. The long-term question of what should the reserve account be on a global basis is something we're going to talk about Wednesday in terms of should we have 10 million in the bank? Should we have 12 million in the bank for future FEMA funds? Should we have, we're staring at probably $3 million to line the rest of Burnham Road based on where we just had a spill in February. Being able to fund that out of free cash flow is why we have the reserve accounts. Now, our capital projects, and we're going to talk about this on Wednesday, they're not cheap. They're big dollar things. We don't have a lot of $10,000 capital projects. We sort of build up for large projects and then fall back into a reasonable range. The question is, should we be closer to the bottom of the scale in terms of reserve funds and potentially have a problem should we have a capital project and a major FEMA event in the future in the same year? Or should we have something in the $10 to $15 million range from a reserve fund account to be able to fund major projects and also fund a FEMA project at the same time in years down the road? That's sort of a policy level discussion for the board to decide. Do we want to have 5 million in the bank, or do we want to have 10 or 15 million in the bank to be able to sort of handle those compressions in project costs and FEMA funds? We've seen now that having 22 million in the bank and being able to fund a major capital project and a FEMA project in the same year was a very prudent, because we were able to do it. But those are policy questions, and we'll talk about that on Wednesday.
This $1,229,000 is something that will not be reimbursed by FEMA or Cal OES.
That is correct.
Normal system maintenance.
Well, it's a capital project that we caught after it failed rather than doing it ahead of time. And those are the risks in our business. We don't have, yes, we have $10,000 projects, but we also have $1 million projects. And we also, unfortunately, are at risk of $5 million FEMA events. Do we want to be prepared for those $5 million FEMA events, or do we want to have them happen and go, uh-oh, now what do? We don't have the money in the bank. And so those are some policy discussions that we'll have on Wednesday and kind of, outline where we think we're going to go. We have a capital project list that's tens of millions of dollars long. So if we had another 10 million to spend, we could go spend it pretty quick. All of the siphons on Creek Road that were built in the 60s in cast iron need to be horizontal bored and drilled and replaced. the entire trunk line from the city of Ojai to Sulphur Mountain is something that is starting to, it's clay, so it's not going to fail like the Techite does. But long-term, it needs to be lined. Well, that's 5 miles worth of lining of large diameter pipe. Those aren't cheap projects. Those are measured in $300 a foot. You know, you do a 300-foot section of trunk line, you know, manhole to manhole, times 300 times 300, you're talking about a lot of dollars per reach of pipe. And so what level of compression does the board want to have from a policy decision on being able to say, hey, that's an important thing, let's go do it, pay cash and not have to burden the ratepayers with bonds and interest? That's been the policy as long as I've been here, and goes back many, many years, decades before me.
Mr. Curtis.
Signaling my IT man, thanking him. Extended hearing.
How's that? You working all right?
Working well?
Yes, we're fine.
Good.
We can hear what you're thinking too, Jeff.
Didn't know about that feature.
Shows up on my screen.
Okay, it's apparent to me that this budget adjustment is necessary and needed, so I would like to move for approval of item 10.
Second.
All right, we have a motion in a second, Allison. You want to call, please?
Director Curtis,
Yes.
Director Martin,
Yes.
Director Kentosh,
Yes.
Berg,
Yes.
Director Quillisi,
Yes.
Director Lorik,
Yes.
and Chair Stone.
Yes. Move on to item 11. This one was always near and dear to Director Lots.
Yes. Well,
Replacement of information technology equipment, firewall and VPN appliance.
Yeah, so we have our firewall and our VPN appliance for remote access to the system is ending support at the end of the year here. And so it was scheduled for replacement, and it is currently 2 appliances, where it's now going to be 1 appliance that handles both the firewall and the VPN access. This is for the operators to gain access to the system when they check the SCADA and so forth. And so in August, support will end for the current product that we have, so it will no longer be supported.
One of the things I would add, and Yan and I worked on it, is when we got hacked in 2020, we got hacked through a open port on our VPN sort of system. And so one of the significant changes we've made was we no longer have laptops or any computers, any kind of computer that can access our system through the VPN. All of it has to be done on an iPad. And so that iPad sort of VPN link is a lot more secure than a computer laptop VPN link. So someone has to be able to hack an iPad, hack Apple products to be able to access an open VPN port. What a VPN port is it's basically an open door to your system, where in 2020, a bot traveling the internet looking for open VPN ports found our open VPN port and entered into our system, probably for somewhere in Eastern Europe. So we eliminated all VPN access for all computers, laptops, anything. It can only be done through an iPad, and so it's a lot more secure. The other thing we did is we went in and did some network changes that I won't go into in the public forum, but making sure that there's a lot more system controls internal to that VPN appliance to make sure that someone who does get in or magically gets through an iPad has a lot less ability to wander around our system. So there's a lot more behind it other than just a computer hit its life and we got to replace it.
One more component, and that's that those iPads can only for district-owned iPads that no other iPad can get in. So, again, another layer of security.
And are there several purveyors of this software for firewall
It's
or?
actually hardware, but there are several purveyors. This is the NASPO contract, so state contract. So it's
So this is within our
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
It looks like we have already approved the budget for last year, which included $45,000 for this item, and this is coming in at 41,950. So I'll move for approval.
We approved an appropriation. We approved a budget. Now we're appropriating the money.
Curtis. You have a question?
So, isn't the plant run an awful lot on computers?
It's all run by iPads now.
I think it's pretty important that we put that firewall in because somebody could screw up the plant and cost us a lot of money. Fine with that.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
It was a replacement, out of cycle, end of support.
And it was scheduled anyway, because I mean, there's actually a 7-year life on this and it's 8 years old. I mean, so, yeah.
That's why we budgeted a replacement last year.
We have a motion and a second. We have further discussion. Roll call, Allison.
Director Curtis,
Yes.
Director Martinson,
Yes.
Director Kintosh,
Yes.
Director Byrd,
Yes.
Director Quillisi,
Yes.
Director Ulrich, and Chair Stone.
Yes. And now we're gonna move on to item 12. Recruitment of general manager, and interim manager, and at this one, I think I'd be comfortable with reading the statement before we go. So now's the time for the directors to share any substantial information that you may have received from sources outside of the public decision-making process and which are relevant to the decision set forth in the agenda item. So has anybody had any discussion with anybody outside of this agenda item? Director Martins.
The only thing I can bring up is that meeting we had 2 months ago where people were raising issues that were occurring within the office. I don't know if any of those things were resolved or if they have any impact or could have any impact who we might choose as an interim general manager. I wasn't here for the last few meetings and I'm not part of the personnel committee, so I leave it to your wisdom to tell me it's not something I should worry about, or it is something I should worry about.
Yeah, I'll let the attorneys answer that, but I think it's probably okay. Director Curtis.
Good.
Perfect. Kintosh.
Report.
Director Berg.
I have nothing,
Director Albert.
So where I say like, where am I? I have nothing.
I have nothing to report.
And I have nothing as well. So we'd like to take this. F or Alice.
So the personnel or the full board met on April 11th to discuss the methodology for recruiting the permanent replacement for Jeff. Also the discussion of recruiting for an interim general manager while we go through that process. It was decided that we would go through a recruiting firm to do that. A list of 6 recruiting firms were mentioned during that meeting. A RFP was sent for both an interim general manager proposal and a permanent general manager proposal to all 6 of those. Additionally, it was published in the paper for any additional firms that want to respond. They are welcome to do that as well. I've received several responses with intent to provide an RFP. I believe I should start seeing those probably next week based on some of the responses that I've received. So hopefully we'll get some good momentum there. In the interim of having either of those recruiting firms selected and start working on both the interim and the permanent general manager recruitment, somebody has to do some of the day-to-day decision-making and operational management. So the letter before you is to decide on who that might be. Jeff proposed that myself and Bradshaw work together to do that with our individual subject matter expertise, both operationally for the collection system in the plant and mine in administration and finance related things. So before you is a recommendation to have both Bradshaw and myself step in as interim general managers before we get an official interim general manager. And the acting interims. And as part of that recommendation for a 10% increase in our rate of compensation, our hourly rate of compensation, and then making myself non-exempt, so overtime eligible, because my arrangement is a little bit different. And that is what is before you. I'm happy to answer any questions. I feel perfectly confident that between Bradshaw and I, we can work together to keep things running, bring anything before you, the board, at any special meeting or regular meeting that are areas of concern or discussion. And we look forward to working with the recruiting firm to sort of find our new normal.
The appointment of a recruiting firm is going to be a board decision, though.
Yes. Director Martins.
So with two in charge, each has their own expertise, which you alluded to. Has that been laid out in some document? The other question I have is if there's an situation that could overlap both, it so happens you both disagree, who has the overriding vote?
I don't really
It
anticipate
comes up in my
that.
families.
I don't anticipate that being a huge issue. I mean, we all as a team work together on numerous things. We have an established set of work groups already in weekly meetings for different subject matters. And actually everybody here is part of that. So we're always having group discussions and providing insight based on, our own opinion, our own, area of expertise, our own area of responsibility. And so far has not been a problem. I don't anticipate it being a problem. I'm sure we can work it out. Like I said, I think we have our own very sort of vested interests in our area, and we'll converse about how it affects one another. But I would not have an enormous strong opinion on certain things at the treatment plant. I wouldn't presume to have that expertise, and vice versa, I think. So I think we're probably pretty good on that.
I generally agree with you. I just think it would be prudent to establish a who's king in the end. If something does come up that's
Why
out of the ordinary.
boards have an odd number of members.
I would sort of say that if there is something of a significant thing where these two completely disagree with each other, the situation probably would warrant the board making the decision.
Well, that's fine, as long as there's an understanding around that.
I think that
It's clearly something that would happen out of the ordinary.
I think that, Bradshaw in his role from an operations perspective has a state obligation to make decisions that are in line with our operating permits from an operations standpoint. And Allison has a responsibility under fiduciary responsibilities to make decisions that are in correct compliance with state auditing and reporting. So I'm sure that Bradshaw would stay away from telling Allison how to audit something, and I'm sure Allison would tell Bradshaw how to change a valve. But if in the event that the two of them couldn't decide, and the broader staff of managers and experts couldn't decide, I'm sure it would end up right back here for some discussion as a policy more than an action item.
Director Curtis.
Is there a problem with Bradshaw not being at the plant full time?
No, he is our only certified chief plant operator. And he is a grade 4 operator, which we are required to have as a district in compliance with our permits. And so he has that sole responsibility, whether he's at the plant, he's here, or he's home in bed, has that legal obligation as the chief plant operator to make those decisions, no matter where he is.
We need to get another grade 4 group at the plant.
We're budgeting for one too.
Well, I think we'll talk a little bit more about that Wednesday, but we've spent a lot of time and effort trying to make sure there's redundancy and cross-training here at the district. And when we only have one expert who can do one thing and certified to do one thing. I think there's some risk at the district to not having that redundancy and cross-training in place. District, forget people's names, but district as a whole has an obligation to continuation of service, and district needs to plan for that activity.
I think I'm fine with everything you guys have proposed. I think you thought it out well and we're heading in the right direction. The only thing that occurred to me as I was reading all the materials is what a lengthy, difficult process this is going to be for us. And I thought that the 10%, it crossed my mind that the 10% just seems tad bit parsimonious. So are we locked into that 10% or can we increase it to 15?
You have the policy. There is no state law or otherwise that says it has to be one or the other. It was what was done before my time when I was hired with Ron and Brenda, but it is entirely a board policy discussion.
It's a huge increase in responsibility for these folks. Would you guys entertain a slightly higher number?
We should all talk about it.
Yeah, I think these ladies and gentlemen are both gonna be extremely busy, have a lot more responsibility than they've had. I don't think I have a problem with 15%.
Okay, well, in that case, I'll make a motion then, that we adopt item 12A, we throw it away for our memories. B, we appoint Allison Young and Bradshaw Pruitt as acting general manager of Signature Authority effective this Thursday. We approve a 15% increase in rate of compensation on a per hour basis for Allison and Bradshaw as general managers as non-exempt positions. So that's my motion.
Director Martinson.
Going back to my earlier question, who becomes the public face of the district? I mean, you have contact with various agencies, city, county, state, federal. Who is that person amongst these two?
Well, if it's an operation issue, it's Bradshaw. If it's an administration issue, it's Allison. Most of the topics fall cleanly one way or the other. There's very rarely something that I'm doing that is a combination of both, and I'm solely the only one involved in the conversation. If we're having conversations with an outside agency about an operations issue, part of the team is involved with me. If I'm having a conversation with a outside agency about something financial or insurance or legal, Allison's on the conference call with me. There is a gap, really because of my political contacts and my political role, that's impossible to replicate. But they'll do a fine job of getting back up to speed if one of those issues, arises. And that was going to happen with the new general manager anyway. My personal relationship with Matt Levere at the county is a personal relationship with him, and I have others based on doing this for 35 years. They'll do a fine job on a topical issue. Most of the other outside agencies also understand when there's a change in an agency, they look to the staff to also be involved in those conversations. And so I think it'll be fine in the event of something completely extraordinary that neither of the two of them can answer and neither of the two of them can agree on. It's probably a big enough issue that it should be coming to the board as a policy discussion.
So I don't think we should come to you as a consultant.
Well, you can't. However, I'm sure they all know, everybody knows where I live and everybody knows my phone number, and I'm sure it will not stop ringing on
At 2 a.m.
I'm sure of that.
Director Berg, did you have a question?
No, I'm good. I'd like the current motion.
Director Coulson.
If he's not seconding the motion, I'm happy to.
Didn't we have a second on that?
Not yet.
Oh, I'll second that.
I did have a question. The kind of thing I think about, I think, is what you just alluded to. If the main trunk line along the Ventura River breaks again at 2 o'clock in the morning, how can these two acting interim general managers make the contacts that you did get things moving?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have made extraordinary strides in the last couple of years, probably post-COVID. With our whole, there has been a very deliberate and concerted effort to cross-train and redundancy. When we had the spills on in January of 23, it's an all hands kind of event. And everybody here and everybody in the organization was involved in all the little pieces and all the little building blocks that it takes to move projects forward. And so I'm absolutely confident that if we have another event of any kind, that the team here will be able to handle. And if there are questions and issues about them handling it, I'm absolutely confident they'll know the consultants to call. There are experts, you know, we operate a little bit as a contract organization. We have 20 employees. We have a few open positions right now, but in round numbers, there's 21 people here doing 50 jobs. Well, there's a whole host of people right outside that arm's length, outside of the organization, that provide services to the district and subject matter experts. Whether it's our auditor or our legal counsel or our accountant or a couple of key civil engineers or a couple of key geotechnical engineers or a couple of key environmental permitting experts. There's a whole host of people that are right there. And the staff as a whole has already contacts with those people, deals with them on a daily basis. Yes, they have some contacts at a higher level, but you know, that'll be okay. I'm absolutely sure if we needed county help and Bradshaw reached out or Allison reached out to Matt Levere's office and talked to his chief of staff, Clint Garman, you know, you would get the agency to agency immediate connection that would be necessary to get the district the support it needed to meet the challenges.
My concept in hearing about all that went on in January and February of last year was that it was in fact all hands on deck. Everybody's working. At the same time, Jeff is making calls to Toro and others, to people he personally has a relationship with, to get things moving before the sun comes up.
And
now, is that, you feel confident that that will still take place?
yes,
It won't be Jeff calling anymore.
won't be Jeff calling, but you know, on a contractor basis, Liz can call those same people, has name recognition now because of the last couple of few years of her work doing that work, you know, alongside the entire team. Whether it's our environmental people, our civil people, our contractor people. You know, one of the things, it's a continuum. Succession planning isn't there's nothing and then there's something. There's this continuum of cross-training and redundancy. And you go from 0% overlap to 100% overlap over some period of time. And so we've worked very hard, COVID, post-COVID to today, putting staff in place and allowing them to participate in the discussions and the decision-making so that they can do those things. I'm totally confident that they can do those things. They may not make the instantaneous decision that I made, but they'll talk amongst themselves and make the decisions that are necessary for the district to go forward.
Make the right connections timely.
Right. I'm sure if we had a county problem and Allison picked up the phone and called Clint Garman in Matt Levere's office or Maruja, the conversation would very quickly and the connection would be made. I'm absolutely confident that that team would respond to the district's reach for help, assistance, conversation. Oh, Jeff isn't there anymore. Sure, no problem. What can we do to help? That's the common sort of connection that you get agency to agency. Agencies don't go, oh, Jeff's not there anymore, we're not going to help. They don't do that. Yes, I have a 35 years of relationships with some of these people. That's okay. The agencies are going to respond to the agency needing help or assistance or discussion. Agency to agency, irrespective of the person's name, whether they've been doing it 2 years, 5 years, or 35, they're going to get the same sort of respectful cooperation that's necessary.
You have a motion in a second.
On signature authority, are there any, because we normally have one GM and now we have two, are there documents that both must sign or it can be deemed a completed signed document?
No, either one can sign. We have tried on some of our documents to make them general manager sign, not Jeff's signature. And therefore, designation of these two individuals as general manager covered the general manager coverage. We've tried to stay away from Jeff sign, Allison sign, just because then when one's away for vacation or something, you can't get something signed. And so we've tried to make documentation general manager, and by designating them acting general manager, they have the authority to sign those same documents.
Two signatures aren't required.
Two signatures are required.
Okay.
Checks, though, it's still two signatures.
Two signatures still on checks.
We'll work through that.
We'll work through that. We have more than two signers today. All of you all, and so.
And I've already alerted the bank that we'd be changing sort of variations of signers in the interim, so.
Any further? Motion in a second. Allison, would you call roll, please?
Director Curtis,
Yes.
Director Martinson,
Yes.
Director Kentosh, Director Berg,
Yes.
Director Quillisi,
Yes.
Director Ulrich, and Chair Stone.
Yes. Okay, now I guess we're gonna move into a closed session.
Well, I think we need to have,
I have an attorney.
I think we need to have a conversation before we go into closed session. So there's no attorney on the line. So it would be my recommendation that we defer the closed session and we republish it for Wednesday and ensure that they're here for Wednesday's conversation. Because I don't think we can even go into closed session without having them available.
Yeah.
I have a question, you probably have to answer no, but on item 13, it says anticipate litigation. Is there any way you can give us a hint as to what that's about, or should we wait until Wednesday?
We'll wait till Wednesday.
It might need to be, well, yeah, I guess I can try to re-agenda,
But it'll have to be,
it's special, so I could do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try for Wednesday. We'll have to
We'll figure
re-agenda.
out.
And then we'll meet again Monday if we don't.
Worst case, we'll do
So
it
if we don't get
Monday.
it Wednesday, we can get
we'll,
it.
we'll re-agendize these two existing
This
conversations.
is item 14.
That is correct.
And I guess just for something that I would like to clarify, that maybe you guys already know or Allison can check on, but A to Z is still our firm, Rick, so we're not hanging out right now.
That is correct.
Nobody, okay.
That is correct. So we're still under contract with A to Z.
And the specific contract will be part of the conversation under that item.
Okay.
Yes.
So Misha works for A to Z, right?
Yeah.
You could have come to that. Probably better to have her here than nobody.
I don't want to get into,
We need to-
should have, could have happened. We'll straighten it out and re-agendize it so we can have a complete and thorough conversation.
48 hours till Wednesday night.
It's a special meeting, so we can
10 days
24
tomorrow.
hours for a special meeting.
Okay, so with that, that kind of takes 15 off of the table as well.
Correct.
So 13, 14, 15 will all be deferred.
14th.
13, 14, 15.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to information items. 16, 17, and 18. Have anything they want to pull off of there? Ken Tosh, you have
Looking
something?
at me.
No, I'm looking at
And something I was gonna,
Ken Tosh.
gonna comment on the operations report, but I can't remember what it was. It was a good
Magnificent.
report, though.
I did have
Very
one
quickly,
item.
okay.
Thank you. I had asked, out of curiosity, on page 90, it talks about PSL inspections. I asked, does staff inspect for downspouts directing rainwater into the PSL? And if so, what action is taken? The answer was they do not. I'm wondering what it's the position of the district that should not happen. What if any proactive action does the district take?
We don't camera downspouts and yard drains at the time of a PSL inspection. We do a visual inspection. If there's anything obvious, then we'll make a corrective action. But we don't.
Downspout disappears into the ground.
Correct. We've had a couple of cases where people have yard drains and there's some sort of visual sort of clue that it goes into the sewer. Meaning there's a yard drain in a depression, but there's no visible outlet into the curb or some other thing. So we will do those. We don't actually camera all the downspouts and the drains. One of the, as the district moves into some lining in Oakview, so that's the next big area of I&I we get. And that's the next big geographic area we need to look at. We think and know of some significant leaks on Creek Road that is planning on going after some lining. But Oakview shows some indications that there's some I&I. When we go into those neighborhoods, we may have to smoke test, which is always a wonderful neighborhood experience. You basically throw a smoke bomb down the manhole and you put a fan over the manhole and it blows the smoke down into the main lines, up the laterals. And in theory, it should only come out the roof vents on each house. And so you should put in a yellow smoke bomb and you should see these nice yellow plumes of smoke coming out of the roof vents in the house.
The neighbors?
Yeah, well, not everybody's roof vent is sealed in the walls and in the attic. And so sometimes you pump smoke into someone's attic and it comes out the roof vents on the attic and they see smoke and they call the fire department. It can get very PR challenging. And so, but we may have to do some of those in Oakview to find some of those sorts of things.
Well, I asked about that because I noted in the operations report that this past month of February, I guess it was, we hit 90% of capacity on the plant.
Well,
About twice or a little more than twice the normal.
so when you look at our there's a little bit of a sort of a thought process on flow to the plant. So the plant normally treats about in normal dry 1.5 million gallons a day. Running a little higher than that because we're still getting groundwater intrusion into our system. So we're running the strong side of 2 million gallons a day. So we're still getting I&I, but the creek's still running pretty good and it's probably going to run all year round. So when we get a storm, we don't, the front end of the plant, the influent pump station can handle about 13 million gallons a day. Now the plant operators, and we have a difference of opinion, they think in MGD. I think in gallons per minute. Because to me, it's not important what's really happened on a daily basis from a treatment perspective. To me, what's important is how many gallons a minute are coming in the front end of that plant. Because if you can't move it in minute one, whether or not you can handle it over the course of the day doesn't really matter. And so we have moments at the plant where the inflow coming into the plant So one MGD is about 700 gallons a minute. So if you have 10 MGD, you're running 7,000 gallons a minute. So you can run 7,000 gallons a minute, which is over the plant capacity, but it's only for a short period of time. So the question is, what do you do over that short period of time? Years ago in 96, 95, 94, we had a big El Nino year. And we really did exceed that 13 MGD at the plant door for a momentary spike in time. And the sewage was pouring out the influent pump station door and running across the pavement. In Ron's words, it was mid-thigh high or mid-calf high coming out the door. So it wasn't a very technical discussion. It was it's about up to here on my leg. That hasn't happened since 96. So with the I&I controls, even in high rain years, yes, we still get a lot of flow, but we've never gone back to those days of those excessive flows. We still have storms that in a moment exceed the plant capacity on a daily basis, but they can be handled on a gallons per minute basis. And so what we do in those moments is we pump it out to the drying beds. So you're pumping out extra flow you're shaving that peak out into the drying beds, and then you process it later that day or the next day or 2 days later. And so it's quite a dance, but we have about 5 million gallons or 6 million gallons of storage where we can store excess momentary peaks at really high, but not on a daily basis.
Before it hits the headworks?
When it hits the headworks, we can move 13 times 700. We can move about 9,000, a little over 9,000 gallons a minute into the plant. So it comes into the influent pump station, goes into the ditches, goes to the clarifiers. We can move about 9,000 gallons a minute. We've never exceeded that. But it gets pretty dicey because from the clarifiers downstream can't handle 9,000 GPM. So that's where we use our trailer pumps to pump it out to the ditch. So you move 9,000 gallons a minute max in the front end of the plant, and in the back end of the plant, you run about 5,000 gallons a minute. Well, that 4,000 gallons a minute extra, well, it's been treated. It hasn't been disinfected and filtered. It goes out to the drying beds. You're gonna have to rename that lake. Lake Bradshaw. So therein lies this a heavy flow. We're over 10 MGD, not for the day. I think the most we push through
2.9, I think.
Right. I think the most we push through on a total day basis, I think we hit 4 million gallons a couple of times this year. So you have momentary peaks of 7, 8, 9,000 gallons a minute. But when you measure that over the course of a day, it was only 4 million gallons for the day.
What we see in the ops report is the average over a month.
Right. So when you come in and you look at the rain flow and you see this, curve heading for the moon when it comes to inflow, yeah, that's bad. 9,000 gallons a minute for the course of the day, we got problems. It doesn't statistically happen. Don't get that intensity of a rain, that intensity of inflow coming into the system for 24 hours straight. It's never happened. Going all the way back to 1969, it's never been recorded to have happened. But you get down to some hours that you're like, we got to push really hard with the trailer pumps. That's where they come into play.
Anything else from anybody that wants to pull off of this? Hearing nothing, let's move on down to board member comments. Any more comments from anybody?
Thank you to the staff for very illuminating ops reports. Pictures don't always make a lot of sense to me. But it's nice to see what's going on down there without having to go take a tour every couple of weeks. So thank you.
Appreciate you.
Mr. Palmer, comments?
No comment, Jim.
You gotta say,
Two in a row.
Okay, I'll say something. It's my birthday.
It is this birthday.
Right.
Hey, Jeff.
So it is my birthday today and I'm at a board meeting. So that's my dedication.
Birthday, what are you doing?
Please did, Jim, please don't. I already did that to me.
We didn't agendize everybody.
Nobody sings in key anymore.
All right, with that, we will adjourn at 7:10.